for having me. So just as a starting point, just so I've got a good idea of who's in the call and who's not in the call from yesterday, could everyone just take one action for me, and that's just type into the chat box whether you, so the sport you play, whether you are a full-time athlete, dual career, or recently retired or transitioned. And importantly, whether you were attending yesterday's session or whether this is the first one. So I'll just give everyone like a minute or two to do that before we get started, and we'll go from there. Perfect.
I think Ross came in a little bit late to just at the end of that there, just if you want to re-explain what everyone's doing in the chat box right now. Thanks.
Yeah, so just as a starting point for anyone who's just joining, if you could input one thing for me via the chat box. So that's just the sport you play, whether you are full-time athlete or dual career or recently retired, and whether you attended yesterday's session or not. It just gives me an idea of your starting point. Great, so I see we've got quite a few who attended yesterday and also some new ones as well, so at least 4 or 5 there. Okay, perfect. Right, we'll get started. So for those who did attend, another one that didn't attend yesterday. So we'll get started now. For those who did attend yesterday, just bear with me. I'll introduce my background really briefly, and then we'll go on to the the body of today's session. So I wanted to start by providing some some context on my story and background. So I'm an ex-badminton player. I played for Scotland and was fortunate to be supported by the SIS for almost 10 years, from the ages of 13 to 22. I retired from badminton back in 2013. I relocated to London. I joined a recruitment firm in London where I spent about 8 years or 8.5 years helping to build a business. So I had 2 years in London before having the opportunity to relocate back to Glasgow and open an office for the London-based firm. And the part of the business which I was responsible for in Glasgow, we placed hundreds of senior engineering professionals per year into new positions across Europe. So we placed people across at least 10 countries and across various sectors, including tech, pharmaceutical, renewables, construction, oil and gas. And really through those experiences, I gained quite a lot of knowledge and experience in terms of how to build a career and how people typically successfully build careers. And those experiences led me to Athlete Origin. I fundamentally wanted to build a company which delivered a service for a group or community of people that I was passionate about. And for me, that was very much the sporting community. So we were founded in 2021. Our mission is to empower athletes to live successful and fulfilling lives beyond sports. And our service is quite specific. So we connect current and ex-athletes with commercial careers across the technology sector. So today's session isn't going to be focused on our recruitment services. It's the second part of a 2-part series focused on athlete career development. So yesterday we did a presentation on how to identify careers which potentially align with you. So how to think about what careers could interest me and what careers could be potentially suitable. And we provided a framework to help people self-identify careers which could potentially suit them, plus lots of reflective questions and resources to help you in that regard. Today, our focus is going to be on how to take practical steps towards careers we're seeking. So we should last in the region of about 40 minutes. And please, if you have any questions at any time, just raise your hand in the chat. I'll pause and you can ask your question, or alternatively at the end, I'd welcome all and any questions on all things career. So let's get started. So today's agenda, you can see it on here on the slides. So our starting point of this session assumes that we have a sense of careers or job types that we're potentially interested in entering. And after you have a sense of those basic pathways, the steps that we're going to outline in today's session are quite logical and practical and useful to take. Really, whether you are a full-time athlete, dual career, or recently transitioned, you can start taking a number of these steps many years before you ultimately retire or transition from elite sport. So taking a look at the slides here, the basic agenda will explore educational requirements and attribute requirements for the careers we're seeking. So how we think about that. We'll explore professional profiles. So that's in essence your CV and LinkedIn profiles, what they should include, how to make them fit for purpose in a job search. We'll look at where to look for jobs. And in the where to look for jobs section, we're going to explore traditional and non-traditional methods or avenues of job seeking. And we'll provide some specific resources and insights here. Then we're going to look at different ways of approaching companies that you're interested in working for or learning more about. And finally, we're going to touch on some insights on mentorship, professional mentorship. So that's the agenda. Okay, so first slide here is educational attainment and attributes or skills for the careers that we're seeking. So this one is pretty basic, but it does remain an important starting point when we think about taking steps towards the careers that interest us. So as we all know, careers have varying educational barriers to entry. So, we can think of some careers like law, medicine, some forms of engineering, which set relatively high bars educationally, often requiring many years of study before employment can actually be obtained. And then we have other pathways, such as commercial roles in tech companies, for example. They've got lower educational barriers to entry. They have many opportunities for applicants, in some cases without degrees, and they often value applicants with diverse experiences, such as elite sporting achievements. So these types of opportunities, on the other hand, although they might not necessarily require degree qualifications, they'll typically set quite a high bar for attributes or skills, which is why that's included in this section. And then obviously you've got your vocational careers as well. Think of careers like teaching, which will have vocational specific educational requirements. So looking at educational requirements in some more detail, it's really about understanding what you need and weighing whether you're willing to make the necessary or invest the necessary time, effort, and often money in some cases to get through that educational pathway. And for many careers, there's actually emerging qualifications which provide the same access as university degrees do. And you want to take a deep dive into this for the careers that interest you. So I can think of a couple of examples here, like software development, for example, which don't necessarily require a university degree, but instead there can be avenues in via apprenticeships or training and placement through training companies. I can also think of different examples where there's many commercial jobs advertised for companies, which on the job specs say they require a degree to get, but actually from speaking with hiring managers in our day-to-day work, it's actually not often the case. So it's worth doing your homework on all educational requirements, and if you can, speaking to industry insiders. So I think we lost someone from the chat and then it's back in. It's Holly. So that's the educational piece. And then for attribute and skill requirements. So for this, it's thinking about, well, how can you clearly demonstrate that you have the attributes or skills required for whatever pathway that you're looking to enter? And how can we back them up with examples? So let's say, for argument's sake, we want to demonstrate that we have exceptional organization skills, right? You might want to think about, well, I can demonstrate this by balancing a training schedule of 20 hours per week, competing in international competitions twice a month, and doing a full-time degree, right? So therefore, balancing these demands required effective prioritizing, and it was essentially essential to my success in my sporting and academic endeavors. You know, another example that we could think about from an attribute perspective is if we want to demonstrate that we are curious by nature, okay? So that could be slightly tougher, but we could point to examples of where, you know, we, of new skills we're learning, or books we're reading, or courses we've completed to level up in certain areas. So the summary of this one is, as a starting point, it's just important to understand very early in that career search journey what the general entry requirements look like from the educational and attribute perspective, and then just make a plan. You make a plan to reach that level. So that's educational attainment and attributes. And then after we understand the entry requirements and after we decide to press ahead, the next step really is to start building a professional profile, which is aligned to the careers we're seeking. And if you're still relatively early in your sporting career, a good way to think about a professional profile is something which you can actually build over many years alongside your sport, with courses and education and internships and work experience and things like that. For anyone, I'm not sure if anyone here attended any of our sessions last year, we actually did a full presentation on building a professional profile in a lot of detail. But what we'll do here, we'll cover some of the basics over the next few slides. So the first thing to look at is, well, what do we actually mean? What's our definition of a professional profile? So for me, a professional profile is a collection of documents, physical or digital, which showcase to potential employers that you have the skills, experience, and attributes that they are seeking to hire. So it's a collection of documents, physical or digital, that showcase to potential employers that you have the skills, the experience, and the attributes that they're looking to hire. That's how we define it. And then what's its purpose? Well, in an employment context, a professional profile is ultimately designed to get you noticed by employers in the ways that you want, and to secure you interviews, fundamentally. A strong professional profile is unlikely to land you, the job offer of your dreams. That typically happens through interview processes. But on the other hand, a weak professional profile can mean you lose out on opportunities. So it's ultimately designed to get you noticed by employers in the ways that you want and to secure you interviews. It's that sort of first step in the job search to get you noticed by employers. And then what can we include? Well, for this, really, it can be quite broad. It's really anything that an employer can or might look at when they're screening candidates for an interview. Okay, so you can think of the basics, right? So you've got CVs and LinkedIn profiles, but people shouldn't be limited in thinking that this is the only thing that employers will look at now in the modern day when they're assessing applicants for potential jobs. Okay, so CV is the obvious one. LinkedIn's up there is equally important. But But most employers will also now look at social media channels. So they might look at your Instagram, Facebook. If you've got a decent personal brand as an athlete, maybe you've got a YouTube channel, maybe you do a blog. Companies are going to look at that stuff. And as athletes, I believe personally that you can use that to your advantage versus other job applicants. So athletes typically have a larger following on social media than your average job applicants, and you can actually gain advantages if you ensure that your communication on these platforms demonstrates your positive traits. So, for example, you can clearly demonstrate engaging communication skills or creativity by looking at a social media platform. So when you think about what can be included, the summary is it's everything that a potential employer might look at when assessing candidates for an interview. The big ones are CV and LinkedIn, but they will look deeper than that, and you need to expect that they might look at the social media channels, and I recommend that you use them to your advantage if you can. Okay. So what do we have here? This is our starting point for professional profile. So basically for a CV or a LinkedIn profile, right? So this is typically how you would start your CV or LinkedIn, a short paragraph, which we call a personal statement, okay? And the purpose of this really is to grab the attention of a hiring manager in a few short sentences. And it basically says, this is who I am, and this is what I'm looking for, right? So the example here is it's a made-up person, and we've just created this for the purposes of presentations. But this is an example of, in my view, a strong personal statement. So what I'd like to do here, I'm not going to ask people to interact too much in the session, but I'd like everyone to take a couple of minutes to read through this paragraph, this personal statement. And I'd like, if you can, for everyone just to pick out one or two elements that you feel are strong on or good about this personal statement. And if you just put them in the chat for me, and I'll collate some of the answers. So I'll give everyone about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to do that. I'm not sure if you want to chip in on this one as well, Christy, potentially. Right, short sentences. Oh, they're coming in now. Right, so Chris, good qualities and attributes backed up by examples. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, same with Ross, right? So they pick out specific skills that they've developed in their experience as athletes and students. Yeah. Kirsty, it tells you a lot about the person and not just one area of their life. Yeah. Lots, yeah, straight to the point. We'll give people 30 more seconds. Right, shows how well they balance, yeah, how they balance multiple things, yeah, and excel in them. Yeah. Right, we've got lots there. So I'm going to chip in. I think they're really good examples. And for me, this is strong in many areas. So we've picked out a few things. So it's definitely specific and factual. Okay, so currently a postgrad student in international business at the University of Strathclyde and a Scottish international hockey player, right? So really specific and factual right from the start. And it clearly highlights experience and achievements. Okay, I speak 2 languages and was a contender for the Tokyo Olympics. That in sentence 2 is incredibly impactful. And that's just going to jump out at potential hiring managers. We also picked out, as a bunch of people did in the chat, that all the attributes are actually backed up with evidence. We have my ability to compete at an international level and determination to graduate with honours at each stage of my degree is a testament to my work ethic, time management skills, and commitment to excellence in everything I set out to accomplish. So they're not just saying they've got a good work ethic, good time management, and I want to achieve excellence. They've actually backed it up, and and it's significantly more powerful. So well done for everyone that put that. And then finally, they're actually very clear around the careers that they're looking to pursue. They're quite clear about saying this is what I want. So I'm aiming to start a career specializing in business development, marketing, or PR, ideally within the fintech or gaming industries. So there you have it, a really strong personal statement. And some of the answers there were absolutely on point in the chat. The one thing that I'll just finish on in this slide is a couple of things to avoid on a personal statement. I would avoid making it much longer than what you see here. That's about as long as it should really ever be. And I'd also avoid, to someone's point actually in the chat as well, is I'd avoid generic phrases without evidence. So the sort of cliche is saying you're a hardworking team player, for example, and instead you would write hardworking team player demonstrated by X, Y, and Z. Okay, so it's just making sure you back everything up with evidence. Okay, and then after a personal statement, we will then, this is focused on continuing to write your CV. So this is just basically the other sections that you might include if you're putting together a CV or LinkedIn profile. So they're all here on the screen, and we have key skills or attributes, we have work experience, we have any additional experience if applicable, we have education, and we have achievements. Okay, so you want to include all of them. The order doesn't matter too much, but you do want to include all of them and maybe have your work experience or your key skills and attributes at the top. So for key skills and attributes, let's just take a couple of examples of what good might look like here. So let's say, for example, you want to put coachability as a key attribute that you have. You want to say you're coachable. I think that's quite a quick win for an athlete to get. I think it's really hard to make an argument that an elite athlete isn't coachable. I think by virtue of reaching your respective sporting levels, so it should definitely play to your strengths. So maybe if you're going to say you're coachable, you want to highlight how you seek out, receive, and act on feedback. Okay, so I'm coachable, and this is how I seek out, receive, and act on feedback. And your evidence is your progressive achievements in sport and how you reach the level you had. Okay, so that could be an example of coachability as an attribute backed up with evidence. Or let's take resilience. That's another one which should be an easy win for athletes. So you'll all have experienced setbacks, I'm sure, in your sporting careers and disappointments, which actually in my experience are typically much harder to take in sport than they are professionally. So it's never quite as bad after you've moved out. But an example really of, if you want to put resilience as an attribute, you can provide an example of a setback you've experienced, how you've dealt with that setback, and what you learned. And that's another good example. Or maybe it's more something like a skill like public speaking, and think about what examples you can provide. So that's really key skills with key skills or attributes. So it's probably listing 3 or 4 and backing them all up with evidence. Okay. And then we have work experience or internships, so whatever stage that you're at. For here, really, the basics are outlining the company, your role, responsibilities, your start and end dates. So that's really the basics that you want to cover. To go one better, I also recommend you put any achievements you have against each position or against each role that you've had, okay? Everyone's going to put the basics of the start and end date, the position, the company. But I also do recommend that you put the achievements. Even better, you could, if you had a role where you had clear objectives or clear targets and you managed to surpass them, for argument's sake, that's a really powerful way to demonstrate credibility in your work experience. So I'll give you one example here of how to really think about that. So let's say you're working in let's say it's like a sales focused position, like you're responsible for bringing in revenue for a company, so everything's quite objective and results driven. So you could put something like generated 300 grand of revenue over the last 12 months, which represented 200% of my target and represented 20% of all company revenues, right? So that example, it's not really about the number or the number that someone's achieved. It's all about what someone has achieved against the target that they were set and what was expected of them and the context of their wider organization. So that's why that type of example is so powerful in work experience. So if you can do that against each role, it's just going to add a little bit more to the CV. Then you've got additional experiences. So here you could put internships, work experience, placements, volunteering, training courses, anything that's relevant to the career that you're looking for, which might be looked upon favorably by an employer. We have education. So my only comments on education are, you have what you have, right? So the only comments are I provide more detail around the highest level of education that you have and the most relevant education that you have in respect to the career or the role that you're seeking, and less detail around the older and less relevant education. Maybe if you have, to think of an example here, if you have an undergrad degree in the field that you're looking to go into, employers might be interested in your dissertation topic or some modules from your final year. So think about that when you think about education. And then finally, achievements. This is something that people leave out from CVs, and it's really important to definitely have something in, and it's just bullet points. So I'd outline your key sporting achievements because it's going to look impressive. Maybe anything else you've won. Maybe you've won a leadership award, or maybe an academic award, or maybe you have learned a language and you speak an additional language or something. So that's really the basics of the CV or the LinkedIn profile really as well. So you have the personal statement, and then you've got these sections below it that you can have in the profile. Okay. Next slide is do's and don'ts for a CV. So this is more a bit of a checklist of some basics of things you want to do and things you want to avoid doing. So we'll start with the good, so the do's. So the first one here is emphasize what makes you unique, which is your sport, right? And I'd really encourage everyone not to underestimate the power of this on a CV. Your accomplishments in sport are pretty unique versus the majority of the population, and therefore versus the other people who might be applying for similar jobs to you. And I can't emphasize enough just how much employers value the attributes of athletes when they're hiring people. It's literally our business, and our business wouldn't exist and certainly wouldn't thrive if that wasn't true. So emphasize what makes you unique, your sport. Second one is highlight all of your key accomplishments, quite basic, but don't be shy about it. Sporting achievements, any other achievements, even if you feel that they're quite small. You know, an example here could be, if you think of something that could be attractive to an employer, maybe you've learned to speak a language over the last 12 months. Okay, so you could say, learn to speak Spanish to a B2 level over the last 12 months. Okay, so that could be something, or maybe you're applying for a role where you don't have all of the prerequisite qualifications. So maybe you could demonstrate steps you've taken to level up, things you've done to demonstrate you're a fast learner, and things like that. So all of your key accomplishments. Use evidence to back up any claims of attributes. So this is super important. Recruiters and hiring managers gloss over buzzword attributes. So the example I gave on the what to avoid in the personal statement, just saying hardworking team player and backed up by nothing, right? They gloss over stuff like that. That's what gives you real power and credibility. If you can just back everything you say up with an example or evidence or context, it just adds power. And then finally, just clearly state your ambitions or the types of roles you're seeking. And it doesn't just need to be one. We saw from that personal statement example that someone, I think they had 2 or 3 options in that example. But you do need some sense of direction, or communicate some sense of direction about the type of pathways that you're looking for, to avoid coming across to employers like you're just wanting any job, and not their job specifically. So that's sort of the basics of the do's. And then we've got some don'ts. So don't make your CV too long. That's the first thing. I'd say 2 pages is typically optimal. A pretty well-known stat, I don't know if you'll know this, but maybe an alarming stat, is a lot of the vast majority of hiring managers and recruiters spend an average of 6 to 8 seconds, so between 6 seconds and 8 seconds, scan reading a CV. So if it's 4 pages, it's probably not getting completely read, rightly or wrongly. So I think 2 pages is optimal. 1 page and 3 pages might be okay as well, but 2 pages is about the sweet spot, and definitely don't make it longer than 3. Secondly, you want to avoid generic, vague statements. That's just the antithesis of using evidence to back up any claims of attributes. Point 3, that should be an obvious one, but clearly language needs to be formal and professional in a CV or a LinkedIn profile. So just make sure you avoid any shorthand or text language. And then finally, it's just spelling and grammar. And you might think that's something that we just shouldn't need to really put in or think about, but it's actually amazing the amount of CVs that I receive weekly that have multiple spelling errors or grammar errors and things like that. And it doesn't play well with employers, because at best it shows a bit of a lack of attention to detail, to be honest, and at worst it can show incompetence or give signs of incompetence. So just make sure you proofread your CV and get someone else to proofread if you can. Okay, so that is the CVs and LinkedIn profiles. So we've got personal statement, we've got the next sections we should include, and then we've got some basic do's and don'ts to just make it visual for you. Okay, so now we have our professional profile and we have that written, and we feel like that's fit for purpose for the career that we're seeking, for the job we're looking to go into. Let's imagine now that we want to look for jobs, right? Well, there's traditional and non-traditional ways to look for jobs. And I'm going to take us through a few examples of each. I'm going to discuss the benefits and the considerations you might want to think about when looking at each. So let's take the traditional first. Okay, so here we have job boards, we have jobs on LinkedIn, we have company websites, we have recruitment companies. So that's sort of, I might have missed out a couple, but that's 4 very common traditional ways that people might search for jobs. So let's take the first one first. Job boards, so these are basically, for anyone that doesn't know, these are basically websites which list job adverts from companies which people can apply to from the website. So some examples of popular job boards, especially at the early or any career level really, you have one called graduatejobs.com. You have one called CV Library, which is a big one as well. You might have heard of some of these. You have S1 Jobs. You might see some adverts for that in the TV. So these are pretty broad, and they have employers across several sectors who publicize and post their jobs on them. So that's sort of like some of the big ones that you can think about and you can use. Interestingly though, and sometimes more powerfully, depending on the pathway that you're looking to go into career-wise, there might be some job boards that are smaller but very, very specific to your sector or your career interest, where you can register your CV on and receive job updates on. If you come across any of them for your career interests, I would focus some time and energy on them. I think they can be quite impactful. The second one we have there is LinkedIn Jobs. So if you're not familiar with this, it's basically a part of LinkedIn where companies can advertise jobs and candidates can apply for jobs. And this is equally good, and in many cases, in my view, better than job boards. The reason for this is companies can often advertise jobs for free on LinkedIn, and that means more companies advertise jobs on LinkedIn versus job boards. Job boards charge companies to advertise the jobs. So there's lots of advertised jobs on LinkedIn, and an additional benefit of this is very often when there's a job advert on LinkedIn, the company lists the LinkedIn profile of the hiring manager on the job advert. So they've got the hiring contact pretty much displayed on the advert. So if you want to show initiative, you can send them a connection request and reach out to them directly. So that's LinkedIn Jobs. Then you've got company websites. That sort of speaks for itself. You can apply for jobs on company websites. And then you've got recruitment companies. My view on this one, so good recruitment companies can facilitate access to opportunities that you simply otherwise wouldn't know about. And they can also really guide and coach you through an interview process as well as an additional benefit. As a rule of thumb though, I recommend focus on making contact with recruiters who specialize specifically in the career path that you're looking to enter, okay? And avoid, to a large extent, the sort of generalist recruitment companies. So if I was to give you an example to illustrate that, let's imagine you're looking to start a career in data science. Okay, so about roundabout, you want to start a career in data science. If you want to look at recruitment companies to help you, I would try to find recruitment companies which have data science and placements as a main focus. And even better, you can use LinkedIn to connect with and reach out to specific recruiters within these firms who specialize in making data science placements for early to mid careers, for example. So go really quite specific. The downside of going to big generalist recruitment companies that recruit into like dozens of sectors, for example, they're just more likely to waste your time in some cases because they'll have fewer opportunities in the areas that you're interested in entering. So that's the rationale behind that. So to summarize the traditional routes, they can and do work for finding jobs, but there's certainly some challenges with them. We are in a competitive job market, and when making applications to job adverts, you're likely going to be up against probably a couple of dozen other people applying for the same jobs at least, and it's making it competitive. So based on that, you also might want to look at non-traditional methods. So let's take a look at some of them. So we have internal referrals into companies. You have your sponsors. You have the option of reaching out directly to hiring contacts. And we also have personal branding and potentially attracting opportunities through that. So I really couldn't recommend the non-traditional ways enough, and I'm going to get into the detail of some of these. So the first one we'll look at is internal referrals at a company. So an example here could be maybe you know someone who works for a company that you're interested in applying for a job at. Companies often have referral programs to incentivize their current employees to help hire in new employees. And a trusted referral internally is a great way just to land an interview. It's a perfect way to land an interview. You get credibility internally, and it can put you at the top of the queue ahead of dozens of other job applicants who've done the traditional route of applying for a job. So an internal referral can be great, sometimes alongside making the formal application. The second route, sponsors. I appreciate that's not relevant, might not be relevant for everyone, but many athletes actually do land the jobs with their sponsors or connections with their sponsors. So my view on that is it's just always worth ensuring that you foster good relationships with your sponsors in case any opportunities arise. And then we've just got directly messaging or calling a hiring contact, right? So this pretty much guarantees that your profile gets seen, and that little thing can just give you an edge in a competitive job market. So you can easily write, especially if it's something like LinkedIn, you can write a short, respectful message to a hiring contact, mentioning that you're an athlete, you'd love to inquire about the role that they're recruiting for, and you'd love to speak with them for some insights if they have some time. And then you've got sort of personal branding. So this is things like, could you share a video or written post on LinkedIn or even Instagram where you're seeking advice or insights into how to land career opportunities in the pathway you're looking at, whether that's marketing or something else. So, could you share that video, written post? LinkedIn's especially good for this. I'll give you a recent example for this actually, which could be quite powerful. We spoke with several of the Worcester and Wasps pro rugby players at the end of last year, just after their clubs were in the unfortunate financial situations, which left some of these players looking for new careers earlier than anticipated. And it was really interesting in the conversations with them. Many players were quite active on LinkedIn, and they said that they had posted about the situation on their LinkedIn news feeds, and they had several employers actually reaching out to them directly. I guess firstly offering their condolences about what happened, but then some of them offered interviews. Would you be interested in working for a company? All of that through a LinkedIn post. So that's what I mean by the personal branding side and just sort of putting yourself out there. It can definitely work in practice. So in summary, with where to look for jobs, we have traditional, we have non-traditional. My recommendation is to do both, but the non-traditional route can definitely get a big upside from it in a competitive job market. Okay. Right, approaching companies. So we've explored where to look for jobs, but let's say we wanted to reach out to people in companies directly. Okay, so Generally speaking, I think this is a great idea and a great way, again, for people to build networks and land jobs. So it could be formal or informal. So maybe you're reaching out for a specific role that they've had advertised and as a way to, get noticed alongside making the application. Or maybe it's speculative and maybe you're seeking work experience or an internship to do alongside your sport. Or maybe you're just wanting some insights or advice. So the first step here that I would take is to identify the person or people within a company that you'd like to reach out to. And that can vary, of course, based on the role type you're seeking and things like that. It could be a senior manager, it could be HR department, or maybe it could be someone who's already doing the role, maybe someone quite junior, but they're doing the role that you're looking to enter. So there's probably lots of options, and you can find these people on company websites, which is pretty obvious, or on LinkedIn again. LinkedIn's super useful for it. For LinkedIn, I'm going to share just a really easy way to do this. So you might want to, let's say you're interested in reaching out to people from, let's say SSE, Scottish and Southern Energy, and you're interested in a project management career, for argument's sake. What you could do is you could go onto LinkedIn and go to SSE's company corporate LinkedIn page. And then when you're on this page, there's an option to click a button called People on the page. And you click on the People button, and that's going to pull up a list of all SSE employees who are on LinkedIn of their profiles. And you can look at job title and where they're working, location, and what they do. And then just basically do some research in the profiles of the people that you're looking to reach out to. Maybe you've got mutual connections with or commonalities with some of them. Maybe mutual interests. Maybe they even shared a sporting background. Maybe you could be really clever and find people who played sport. And you can actually start by contacting them. And then in terms of methods of reaching out, you could send them a LinkedIn connection. You could send them an email. An interesting one is you could send a video message, which might seem a little bit bold, but I can tell you, if you're interested in jobs that are customer facing, like relationship management jobs or sales focused positions, for example, if you send a short video introduction of yourself to a hiring manager or a company, that goes a hell of a long way, and it's very, very well received. So video message is always good. Or you can pick up the phone and just give the company a call and ask if they'd be hiring for graduates or people at whatever stage you're at. So that's approaching companies. And then we've got LinkedIn. And really quickly, I'm conscious of time, we're going to run through LinkedIn, why build a network on LinkedIn, and just some of the practical steps that we can take. Firstly, why build a network on LinkedIn? Well, number one, you're at least as equally likely to get noticed by employers on LinkedIn, by networking on LinkedIn, as you are with emailing your CV to companies or just regularly applying for jobs. I experience almost every month in our daily work hiring managers at companies which we are partnered with requesting to interview an athlete I'm supporting, for example, without seeing their CV. And we would simply both pull up the athlete's LinkedIn profile, talk through the profile, and that's enough for the company to request an interview. That's just how powerful that tool is becoming alongside a CV, to give you some context on that. So what are the basics? You want to have like a reasonably professional photo. Maybe it's you playing sports or looking somewhat professional. You want to keep your profile up to date with latest achievements and experience, just like a CV in that regard. Then you can search for and connect with industry professionals in your chosen sector, and you can send them a short message, explaining why you're looking to connect. And if you're really keen to build a network, you can reach out directly and ask if they'd be willing to have an insights call with you. And then aside from that, once you've started building that network, you can actually actively engage on LinkedIn. I don't know how many of you are active on it, but you can actively engage by writing posts and content and sharing industry news and insights and things like that. And that's where the sort of social media side of it comes through. And you can really build those networks in that regard. So that's the initial basics on LinkedIn. And then I just wanted to share with you one more point on LinkedIn, which is like, what's an example of what a good connection request might look like if you're just reaching out to someone and sending them a connection request with a short note. So it's quite basic. Basically, you want to clearly state who you are and the context of why you're looking to connect. Really simple. So state who you are, why you want to connect, and I'm looking to learn about this area. So here we have, hi Martin, I'm a professional hockey player currently exploring career options for life after sport. I'm interested in learning about wealth management, and given your role at St James's Place, it would be great to connect. All the best, Angus. Right, really, really simple. And you can do that with whoever you want to connect, whoever's relevant for you. And final slide, so mentorship. This really was the final area that I just wanted to share a couple of short insights into. And really it was about how mentorship can support everyone's career development. So the first thing is, like, how do we define this? What's a mentor in a professional sense? Well, it's really someone who can act as an advisor to a less experienced individual. So in a professional context, it's probably someone who works in or worked in a field that you're looking to enter or progress in professionally. So it's someone who probably works in your desired professional field or has worked in your desired professional field. And what are some of the benefits of this? Well, firstly, mentors can be a great source of career knowledge, right? So from basic insights into what challenges and rewards you might expect from your first role, to how to pick up skills quickly, to sector knowledge or company specific knowledge. They're just a great source of career knowledge. They can also help you set goals and help you stay accountable, very much like a coach in sport in that regard. They can help you make connections. They can connect you with other individuals who could support you or positively influence your career development over time. And they're very often relevant to your career interests. So they very often walked the career path that you're looking to walk. And that's really valuable for specific and relevant advice. So they're obviously beneficial to have, but how might we find one? So the starting point is probably to think about what you're looking for specifically from a mentor. So that might be some of the points above, or it might be some points which are specific to you. Then you can make a list of people that you admire professionally, starting with your existing network. So if you have LinkedIn, you can look at those LinkedIn professional connections, and if you don't, maybe you could attend industry-specific events or networking events for the purpose of learning and making connections. And then it's really simple. You just make contact. You can write an initial message similar to the example I gave previously with the example with Martin. And you can ask if they'd be willing to share some insights about their journey and go from there. I'd personally avoid saying that you're looking for a mentor on a first opening message with someone that you've never spoken with before. It could feel like quite a big commitment for them, but ask if they'd be keen to share some insights or willing to have a call with you. And if that goes well, you can sort of progress that and see if they'd be willing to catch up on mentoring calls from time to time. And a mentor and mentee relationship can be super beneficial for both parties. From the mentor's perspective, offering mentoring can support their own career development if they're looking to develop their coaching or leadership skills. It can also just be really rewarding to help others. So it's beneficial for everyone. A lot of people want to mentor other people. So if you feel you could benefit from it, my recommendation is go to it, reach out to some people, and start networking. And then just some final thoughts. So that's our practical steps in a nutshell for taking steps towards the careers that you're looking for. Many thanks for taking the time to listen to the presentations over the last couple of days. Athlete career development is a big, pretty big, robust topic, and we could spend a lot of time talking about the various parts and details. And my hope really is that we've simplified things enough where people feel it's manageable to really make a start on your own career development journey, and that you might find some specific tips that are useful in here. And just to end, I think on a positive note, to reach your respective levels of sporting achievement, all of you have very, very impressive qualities that are widely transferable into, in my view, pretty much anything career-wise. And we work with companies every day to land jobs for athletes, and I can absolutely assure you that there's many companies out there who really value the qualities of elite athletes. So I'll leave you with that. You're all in great positions to succeed in life beyond sport. And if you've got any questions now, we can go through them. I'm absolutely happy to stay a bit late on the call and go from there.